Hello, and welcome to the third development log of my VR horror game. In the last episode, I created player interactions and made a demo to show off all the mechanics programmed thus far.
I am so uncomfortable with the idea of that guy coming in.
In this devlog, I start to bring the game closer to a final product by creating enemy art, polishing the enemy AI, and creating an environment for the game. Hey, I'm Roger. The goal for this project is to create the scariest horror experience available in VR. If you enjoy this devlog, be sure to check out the last one, and with that, enjoy the rest of the video. If you have been following this project, you may have noticed it has been months since I posted my last devlog. I was originally going to post a devlog months ago, but before I had a chance to upload one, my Unity project corrupted, and I was left with a backup that I had made a couple months prior. After taking some time away from the project, I came back to it with a new, fresh direction. My original idea was to create a game similar to Outlast, but focusing on one, very polished enemy interaction instead of creating a story with multiple enemies. After having the project corrupted after months of hard work, I took a step back and decided to take a different approach. I was a big fan of the Slenderman games growing up, but as time went on, I felt like the games were lacking something. And I am probably not the only one who feels this way, because only a few years after the original Slenderly 8 Pages game came out, the franchise completely died. I recently played through many of the older Slenderman games again, and I came up with some game design theories as to why these games did not stand the test of time, and I think it almost entirely boiled down to the mechanics of escaping and being captured by Slenderman. My hope for this project is to create something entirely fresh and horrifying, but to feel a little bit like the older Slender games, and hopefully solve some of their problems which had caused them to fall off over time. With Halloween soon approaching, I thought it'd be a good goal to try to get the game up onto Steam as early access before then. Early access is great for any developers because it gives you, the players, a chance to give me, the developer, feedback while I'm still working on making the game, creating a more polished and fun game overall. With limited time to work on the game before October came around, I decided it may be in the game's best interest to get some help. I pitched my game idea to one of my closest friends, Sky Brissett, whom I have worked on projects with previously. He liked my idea and joined me on the project as lead level designer and story writer. As Sky got to working on the story and level design, it was my job to take the enemy AI I had previously made and turn it into a full-fledged, intelligent, horrifying enemy. I knew I wanted the enemy to have tentacles, so that was the first thing I worked on. The enemy will have the ability to move around the map, but to make his movements more mysterious, I thought it would be a good touch to make the enemy walk only using his tentacles. To do this, I created target positions for each tentacle to move to. When the targets got too far behind the enemy, the tentacles would determine a new target position to move to somewhere in front of the enemy. With multiple tentacles following this rule, it appears as though the enemy is walking only using his tentacles. Although the tentacles were scary, I needed an equally scary enemy model attached to them, so I needed to design a character model. I wanted the enemy to look very skinny, because I wanted to exaggerate the idea that he only uses his tentacles for things, so his arms and legs would be very weak. And because the enemy is a monster, I thought it would be a nice touch to make the anatomy resemble a human, but not replicate it. After I finished sculpting the enemy, the model was made up of over 2 million triangles. To put that into perspective, the model for Link in the game The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was made up of only about 12,000 triangles. Needless to say, 2 million triangles for the current enemy is unacceptable and would most likely crash the game. To reduce the polygon count, I had to retopologize the model. Retopology is where you create a low poly model out of a higher polygon model. Doing this does lose some detail, but with some design tricks the model can look highly detailed even though it's low poly. After retopology, I was able to get the model down to about 10,000 triangles, which is about 0.05% of the original model. It looks kinda bland, but I will be fixing this soon. The next step was to UV unwrap the model. UV unwrapping is where you try to unfold the model like origami to be able to place a 2D texture onto a 3D model. After UV unwrapping was finished, I could bake the high poly model onto the low poly. This gives the illusion of having a lot more detail without actually taking up performance a high poly model would. I then started the fun part, texturing. I only had a few things I knew for sure I wanted for the enemy. I knew he wanted to look creepy, and I wanted him to look earthy, like he came from underground. In the end, this is what I got. The enemy was starting to look spooky, but with the game taking place at night, there needed to be a way for the player to see the enemy in the dark. I've seen plenty of VR games with flashlights, so I decided to change things up. I decided to give the player a night vision camera. Night vision cameras emit infrared light to be able to see in the dark, but human eyes can't see infrared, which is why it doesn't work like a flashlight. I tried emulating this in Unity through a little trick I learned. By having a light that would turn on right when the camera was rendering and then turn off right afterwards, the light would only appear on the camera screen, similar to how infrared light works on real cameras. There was a problem, however. Unity decided that it didn't like this solution very much, and although it worked totally fine in the game, it would break the editor every time I stopped running the game, making it impossible to actually continue developing. So, I needed to come up with another solution. I noticed that I could make it that the camera would not render shadows, which helps a little bit, but it's still not enough. But if the camera did not render shadows, and the player did, that means that any light that was hidden by a shadow would still be visible on the camcorder and not to the player, creating a very similar effect to the infrared light in night vision cameras. My solution was to trap a light inside of an invisible box that still emits a shadow. This way, the player would never see the box or the light, but the light that was inside of the box was still visible to the camera because the camera did not render shadows. This is probably one of the most roundabout solutions I've had in a long time, but it works for now, so I'm keeping it. With a working enemy, player, and night vision camera, it was time to put them all into the map that Sky was working on.
When Roger told me that he wanted help for making this VR horror game for Halloween, I couldn't resist the chance. So within a day, I had an idea for the story, and I won't spoil any of that here, but it really led me to the inspiration of using the Pacific Northwest as the environment. Exploring some of the woods at night, going through the trails, you can get really creeped out not knowing what's around the nearest tree, not being able to see that far in front of you when it's foggy out at night. So I really wanted to use the Pacific Northwest as my inspiration, and in particular for this location, I decided to go with somewhere along the northwest coast of Vancouver Islands, somewhere near Quatsino Sound, where all of the communities are extremely remote. It takes hours to get to down gravelly roads, and it's just very isolated feeling that you get visiting some of these communities. One thing I didn't realize with making this really hyper-realistic terrain is that doesn't necessarily equate to a really good terrain as far as gameplay. By making it really realistic, there's no real flat slopes anywhere. So I needed to realize that, I need to make some more actual flat areas. And also, just a realistic terrain is very boring to navigate, and being able to have these passageways, these little valleys that the player can go through and feel a little bit more claustrophobic in, are really helpful to breaking up different environments instead of just one bland environment that's just all the same terrain type, just kind of rugged. Even though maybe realistic, it's not exciting for the player.
Although the game is far from finished, it's already starting to get scary. As a developer, I usually don't get scared by my own games, but I have already been scared numerous times by the enemy sneaking up on me in the middle of playtesting, which gives me a very good feeling we are on the right track to creating something really good. If you like how the game is coming along, go ahead and wishlist it. The link is in the description. Even if you never end up actually buying Tranquil Cove, wishlisting it seriously helps out with Steam's algorithms, so it would be a great way to show your support. If you liked the video, stay tuned for the next one to see where the project goes from here. Oh, and somehow I forgot to officially say this when recording the rest of the video, but the game's name is Tranquil Cove.